Welcome to another Lightspeed Investing podcast. I've got Cara Jean Wilson here with me again. She is going to break down how she goes about assessing and clarifying leaders' overwhelm so that they can become leaders who are more productive and effective at their work. Cara, how are you doing today?
I'm excellent, Phil. Thank you for having me back again. I'm so excited to dive deeper into this stuff.
Absolutely, me too. As you guys all know, I first started as a leadership development specialist, being the founder of Leadership Visions International. And so leadership's always been in the core of my heart. It is a very underrated skill, one of the most underrated skill, in my opinion, for all business owners and entrepreneurs. So, Cara, on episode 3, I'm excited to really do a deep dive on your specific method, the Cara method, right? Especially when you were talking about taking care of business. So why don't you go ahead and share with the audience what you got for them?
So, we're going to assess the BS, the belief systems of life. So, what we all know that one of the hardest parts of leadership, whether it's personal leadership, company leadership, corporate leadership, whatever that looks like, one of the hardest things is those belief systems that limit our ability to move forward. And each one seems so situational. But really, if we clarify the BS, it starts with the reality that there's kind of only three. There are three basic belief systems that all people share, all people struggle with, and all for really, really understandable reasons. So we're going to clarify what they are, we're going to assess where they come from, or we're going to realign in episode 4 about what we can do with them so that you can achieve some tangible skills, tools, and mindsets for handling them. That sound reasonable?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to start with a very important fundamental, right, which is your belief system.
Yeah.
So what do you typically see that is the wrong belief system? A belief system that is maybe holding them back
Yeah.
and not allowing them to, fully flourish, as a leader that they should.
So there are three typical BSs that we run into in our world as a leader. There is something inherently wrong with me. There is something inherently wrong with you, or there's something inherently wrong with life. We see this in when we get that imposter syndrome, there's something inherently wrong with me. We see that in the, well, I would do this if my boss would let me. Something is wrong, inherently wrong with you. And then we get the, well, it's just the way it's always been. That's just life, right? That there's something inherently wrong with life. And we also know that if there's something with us, well, that's a skill that we can learn. If it's something about someone else, there's probably a tool to help us assess that situation. And if it has to do with life, well, that's mostly a mindset, because no matter how much it feels like something has always been that way, nothing has been that way since forever. Like literally, like even you and I are not the same us as we were a week ago, because of at the cellular level, we're regenerating and becoming new. So there is nothing that has always been, and anything that has been can be recreated. It can be taken down and reshifted and innovated. So the idea that any of these things ought to hold us back isn't real. However, the real tangible part of that is that it comes from real places in our life. It's part of our experiences that shape those beliefs, and we all have had experiences that fit into those categories.
So where do you start? Do you assess the BS in terms of them, the people around them, or the environment? Like, what is do you follow that exact same cadence? And also, how do you assess the BS?
So we assess where it is that you're feeling these things. So we talked about in episode 1, I think, about brain science, right? That things come in through your brainstem, they go through your amygdala and then into your frontal cortex, kind of like having a toddler and a teenager and adult inside your brain at
I
times,
believe so. Yeah.
right? So we can apply that to this conversation. When you're in that brainstem space, that toddler zone, think back to when you were a toddler. Literally, everyone else knew more than you. You were dependent upon everyone else. So that there's something inherently wrong with me is called dependent BS, dependent belief system, where obviously everyone else knows what's going on. So if there's something wrong, it must be with me.
Mhm.
the teen spot, right? We've all been a teenager. When we were a toddler, we experienced that in real time. We can see that, we can experience that, we can all recognize that. It's why it's a common thing. Then you move up to the teenager, right? So that's there's something wrong with you. When you get into that teenage space, whether it's in your life or in your brain, in that space, you've learned to move past your dependence on other. You now have independence. But in that independent space, you're like, I know how to handle this. I know everything about this. So if there's something wrong, it must be with you. I know what I'm doing. I'm independent. Must be your issue. We've all experienced that because we've all been in a place where we're like, I do know this. I'm certain. I am so certain I know this. So why isn't it working? Must be somebody else. That's why it's a common BS, right? And then the adult space. We've moved through our own dependence on other people. We've learned our own independence. And in that adult space, in that leadership spot, you learn how to be interdependent. You now know how to work with others. You've moved through all of the stages. And the BS that comes from that is, well, if we can't do it together, it must be life. It must be too big, too much. There's just nothing we can do about it. And logically, we can know that anything created can be recreated. And if you have people with you, there's really nothing you can't accomplish. That doesn't mean that our hearts and souls will believe that, because throughout our life, repeatedly, there have been situations where things are out of our control, and that reinforces those belief systems. So we start just by looking at that brain cycle and the life cycle and the path from dependence to interdependence.
Okay. Gotcha. So, in terms of both the clarify and the assess, right? What have you seen? Why don't we, move from abstract and the theoretical in these talking points to real life examples. So you have, stories that you can provide where, someone, maybe a client of yours was experiencing something, and, this is how things were before they worked with you, and then you went ahead and then you did the clarity session, you assessed them, and then they came out a little bit differently, so that the audience gets a bit more context with some real life examples.
I love that you brought up the clarity sessions, because I address almost all of these consistently in those clarity sessions. When people start to work with me, often it comes with that life BS. Like, I would love to be able to live my best life, but I can't because there's too many responsibilities, or I can't quit my job, or there's no way I will be able to survive life if I choose to do my own way. And you kind of work through them. They're like, cool. Well, has anybody else ever done any of these, like this crazy idea that you have of launching your own business and maybe leaving leadership and doctorhood and moving into investing? That's like a crazy idea. Has anybody ever done that before? Oh, you know about Philip Chan? Yeah, he's did that too. Oh, so he successfully made that move, which means it's not really that life is keeping you from doing this. What's really going on? What what is it? And they're like, oh, okay, it's my husband, or my wife, or my kids, or my team. There's some person that's in the way. Yeah, okay, I get that. Do you have tools for communication? Can you talk to them about that stuff? Well, yeah, I guess we could have a conversation about it. Cool. Do you want to work through what that conversation looks like? That typically is where that goes. If we start in one of those clarity sessions with, oh, if I could just get through to my employees so they would do the thing I need them to do. Cool. So communication. You are communicating. You've got all the, but it's not really working. Are they reaching out to you? Oh, they are. Oh, okay. So what's your follow-up like? Oh, when they reach out and tell you what's wrong, you don't follow up with them. Why is that? Oh, because you're not sure you'll be able to handle that conversation. So now we've gone from the it's UBS back to those three fingers pointed backwards. Oh, to you. Okay. Well, there's nothing wrong with you. That's just, we can develop your communication skills. That's fine. Where do you want to start? And then you can progress through them. Almost inevitably, there's never just one belief system that's holding us back. Because it's part of our life cycle, it is consistently a layering of them. And that's clarity sessions are so good, because we kind of unpack those top layers and get to something you can tangibly do
Right.
about.
You're basically, well, in a way, what you offer is a fresh and clear third person perspective through just talking to, whoever's in front of you, and getting to know that personality and understanding, just even in the little behaviors, right, word choices that they use, where this is most likely headed.
Yep.
So in a way, you're kind of acting as a facilitating mirror,
Yes.
right? That basically lets them know, and from an objective point of view, so to speak, like, hey, from having this conversation with you, here's, what I'm seeing. And then and by the way, how long are these clarity sessions, Kara?
15 minutes.
Yeah, 15
You
minutes.
can
So
always, I've done over, oh, we're over 8,000 this year. And I have a standing return on investment. If it takes more than 20 minutes, I'll gift you 45 more minutes, and no one has ever needed that.
mhm, mhm.
No.
So what typically happens, after they get some clarity, and after they get assessed? What are the next steps?
The next step is, what are we going to do about it? So, okay, we've clarified where the issue is, we've assessed where it is, then we roll straight through the Cara method. Even within that short 15 minutes, you can go, okay, so let's realign. What can you do? We talked about this in episode one or episode two, the magic three, the three things that give us power, control, and impact in a world where so much is out of our control. It's the way we think, the way we speak, and the way we behave. And then we go through those. Okay, how are you thinking about this situation?
Right.
Well, we've already assessed that there was some BS thinking going on, right? We already figured out, we thought it was everybody else's, but turns out if I take control, there are things that I can do to impact the situation. And
Okay.
then okay, how are we speaking about it? That communication, whether it is communicating with yourself, communicating with others, just getting an opportunity to hear your own words back, it can be so, so powerful. So there is always an active inquiry and reflection process that goes through next. And then we get a map. We make a plan. What can you do? In a world out of control, what behavior can you apply to this situation to move forward?
So, as you know, right, and I know you're really big on utilizing neuroscience and behavioral psychology, which is kind of what makes your leadership approach a little bit different, because it's science based from that regards. What have you noticed in terms of the length of time that someone needs to be with you for old habits to really go away and be, just replaced completely or obsolete completely? I mean, having a 15-minute clarity session, might help in that moment. But what if they relapse, right? Is what I'm getting at. And so what do you see as is the appropriate time frame for people to really work with you so that they usher into a new self?
So that really depends on the person and what they're looking to do, which seems like a wishy-washy answer, but let me give you the science as to why that is the case, right? So it only takes 20 seconds to create what I call a neuro baby, which is the birth of a new neuron in your brain. 20 seconds. That's all it takes to think about something long enough to create a spark of literal life in your own brain. Now, when we talk about habits, of course, our brain is a dynamic genius that looks for opportunities to grow and change. It's also an idiot that falls back into patterns. So, of course, it's going to fall back into those old habits, those old way of thinking, because you've only created a little neuro baby. You haven't created an entire pathway. It's all about connecting those neurons to things that are working. So, a really big part of what we work on is how do we find why this habit came about and how it was meant to be at our benefit, and then how we can shift it rather than unwrite and rewrite it. When I first started, so much of the work that I did was around unwriting these habits, and that takes forever. At the very beginning, it took almost 2 years to get complete transformations with my clients because we were looking to uncreate a habit and then recreate, and it takes ages
Mhm.
to do that.
Well, because they
When I,
also fall into, muscle memory and feedback loops, right?
yeah,
So
and our
there's
life,
like
we've already built that confirmation
yeah,
into our life. Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
With the brain science, I was able to then shift. So rather than trying to unwrite and then recreate a new habit, let's say your habit is to point fingers. Your habit is to place blame on other people. You have been trained throughout your career that if you don't cover your ass and figure out who else could be to blame for a situation, it could go very badly for you. That is a very, very common one I hear. Very common. And we are often very well groomed to point that finger, place that blame. It is a blame game, is something that most humans have played in their life. But that blame, that need to cover and protect yourself, that came to protect you. That habit came from a place of safety. So rather than trying to completely unwrite it and figure out how to make a new one, how can we just shift that? So rather than pointing fingers out, how can you shift the fingers back in? What is something you could do? How can you take control of the situation? And then
Mm.
suddenly you've got a habit, and as quickly as I have completely changed people's habit in a clarity session, and it's taken up to like for my really hard cases where they really have had this, usually for, and not I don't want this to sound as rude as it's going to come out, but it's going to come out kind of rude. For my older clients, for anybody who is over the age of 50, it tends to take a little longer, only because neurogenesis doesn't happen quite so quickly once you hit 40 years old. It's
Gotcha.
just,
No, of
but
course. And I
yeah,
think that's a great forecast into the next topics that we will cover in the upcoming and final episode, right? Where we do a deep dive on your entire set of tools as well as barrage of resources to address these things. So, Cara, thank you so much for taking your time today. It's always a pleasure speaking with you. What is the one best way the audience can get a hold of you if they want to connect with you more, and if they want to participate in that 15-minute clarity session?
go right onto the website. It is on the calendar. You can click onto a clarity session and start getting coaching today. www.takingcara, C-A-R-A for the framework, .com. Taking care of business.
.com. Yep, there you have it. And Cara, I will see you again very shortly. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening in, and hope you all have a blessed day.